The first thing we need to talk about here are skills. Skills are reusable plain text instruction packs that teach Claude how to do a specific task in a specific way. There are a couple ways to use skills. You can bake them right into Claude, or you can store them inside of a project folder if you're using Cowork, but they work the same way. You drop in files, templates, and step-by-step guidance, and Claude follows those instructions the exact same way every time. Claude loads only the skills that it needs when it needs them, so you can have many skills in your Claude configuration without slowing it down. And they're great for repeatable workflows. Anything that you do over and over again, like formatting documents, processing transcripts, generating reports, all of those are great candidates for building a repeatable skill. You can also use some of the skills that Anthropic gives you right out of the box, or you can build your own. That's really what we're going to focus on in this screencast. But before we do that, I will walk you through how to install a skill from the Customize section of the app. Okay, so here we are in Claude Chat, and the way to add a skill is to go to the Customize menu in the left sidebar. And there are two types of things that we can use to customize Claude here. We can connect our apps using MCP, or we can create a new skill. If we're using code, we can also load plugins, but that's not available in chat, so we don't see that option listed here. We'll cover MCP and connectors briefly in a little bit, so for now, let's click on the Skills tab in the left sidebar. This shows all of the skills that I have installed in my Claude account. All of these are active, and you can see there are toggles in the upper right to turn them on or off if you want. But to add a new skill, what we need to do is click this plus button right here, and then choose between creating a skill or browsing the skills. Now, we will build a skill in just a moment, but we're not going to do it this way. We're actually going to do it using Claude. So for now, let's go to Browse Skills, which takes us to the skills directory, and we can see several skills that have been vetted by Anthropic and partners here. Now, the one that we need in order to build a new skill is the Skill Creator skill in the upper left. I have this one installed already, and you can tell because there's a gear icon in the upper right of that skill card. All of the other skills are not installed and have a plus button instead. So before we would build a skill, we need to make sure that that Skill Creator skill is installed. If it's not, and we try to do it, Claude will probably tell us that we need to install it and take us straight here so we can do so, but it's easier to just make sure that you have that installed at the beginning. I'll select another skill here, which I don't have installed yet, like this MCP builder, and just click the plus button to install the skill. So that's basically all there is to it if you want to install a skill from the directory. Now, if we click the X in the upper right to close the skills directory, you'll now see that MCP builder skill that I just installed near the bottom of the list of my skills. So now let's click the arrow in the upper left to go back to Claude and add a skill. Now, there are two ways that we can use a skill inside of Claude. We can just describe what we want to do and trust that Claude will load the right skill at the right time, or we can hit / and select the skill that we want to use from the list. Because it's pretty straightforward, I'm going to use the Skill Builder skill when creating a skill. I'm going to forego calling that specific skill and just type out what I want Claude to do. Create a new skill called Explain Like I'm 5 that explains any concept in 3 parts: the essence, an analogy, and why it matters. Use it whenever I ask you to explain something simply. Okay, so there's our instructions. Hit enter, and Claude begins to build our skill. Now, Claude will actually explain what it's doing as it's building this skill, but I am going to fast forward this for the sake of the screencast and just stop at a couple pivotal points. Okay, so the first thing that's relevant here is that it's going to use the Skill Creator skill and understand how to create a new skill property, and it's going to base it off of a lot of the skills that I already have. Once it gets the idea of what this should look like, it will pull it together, and once it's built the skill, it will actually open it in the preview pane on the right. So here is the full description of this skill, and this is the exact text that gets loaded when we use this skill. Now, Claude built all of this. I just came with the idea, explained what I wanted, and then it figured out how to actually create the instructions for when I actually use this. But it hasn't been saved yet. It just wrote the skill. So if we want to save this to Claude, we need to click the Save Skill button in the upper right. We get this notification that the skill has been saved. If we click the Manage button, we can go to our skills and we can see the Explain Like I'm 5 skill in the list of skills. So now let's go back to Claude and let's actually use this skill. And as I mentioned earlier, there are two ways to use a skill. We looked at the general way, which allows Claude to decide when and where a skill should be used. Let's look at the other way now and first click the New Chat button. If we want to call this specific skill, hit the / key and then select the skill from the drop-down list. That will tell Claude to use this specific skill and then the text, help me understand MCP. So in this case, it's showing us the essence. MCP is a standard way for AI assistants to talk to outside tools so the AI doesn't need a custom hookup for every app it touches. Next, we've got the analogy, which refers to shipping containers, and then the why it matters at the bottom, which explains that the old way was very bespoke and MCP makes it very easy for information to flow into and out of all of these tools that we want to connect. So speaking of MCP, or Model Context Protocol, let's briefly talk about what MCP actually is. MCP is an open standard that lets Claude talk to your external tools, data, and services. If something has a server that can be connected to, Claude can connect to it and get data from that server. MCP was originally created by Anthropic, the makers of Claude, but it has now been adopted by OpenAI, Google, and others, which makes it a bit of an industry standard, kind of like the USB-C of AI tools. When you connect to an MCP server, you can get data from the application that you're connecting to, and it's at the heart of all of the Claude connections that we covered in the previous screencast, like Gmail, Calendar, Drive, Slack, Notion, and many more. What's nice about MCP is that you can connect it once and then you can use that connection across web, desktop, and mobile versions of Claude. And you can also even build your own server to plug Claude into any app or workflow that you can possibly imagine. It's kind of like connecting different apps that have an API, but you don't need to know all the technicalities of connecting those pipes. Okay, so let's take a look at how to set up MCP in Claude. All right, so here we are back in Claude Chat, and to connect an MCP server, we first need to go to the Customize section of the app once again. And just like before, we have Skills and Connectors as options here. Let's click on the Connectors option. So as I mentioned, MCP is at the heart of all of these connectors. To add a new connector, click the plus button right here, and then you can either browse the connectors that are available in the directory or add a custom connector and just type in the server address for the MCP server that you want to use. For this example, I'm going to use Browse the Connectors because I know that I saw vidIQ as one of the options here. And vidIQ is a service that I use all the time to help me understand what's going on with my YouTube channel. So as we wrap up this screencast, the last thing I want to walk through here are some best practices for using Claude Code. So first, as I showed you in this example, describe what you want to build, but not how to build it. Unless you are a developer and you know 100% this is the right tech stack to use, you're better off letting Claude figure out how to connect all the technical pipes. Next, as I showed you, when there is something that you want to change, don't try to describe it via text. Take a screenshot, upload that screenshot to the chat, and Claude Code will do a much better job of understanding what specifically you want to be different. Next, when you're building these web apps, it's actually better to start small and iterate before layering in new features. That's one of the mistakes that I made in my screencast example. You can save yourself some time when you start with something basic and then you layer things on top of it. Also, as I showed you in the screencast, make sure that you plan first, then code second. Never just have Claude start building something. Always ask it to create the plan first so that you can be sure that it is building exactly what you had in mind. And then lastly, even though I used auto mode in the screencast example in order to speed it up, You probably don't want to use that when you're using Claude Code, especially at the beginning, and you want it to explain things before you just accept all of the edits that it's trying to make. This will go a long way in helping you understand how to communicate with Claude more effectively and will greatly increase the quality of the result that you're able to get.